The following show is brought to you in partnership with the Institute of Politics, Policy, and History, Blue Star Strategies, Bright Road Incorporated, Make It Plain Podcast, and RPC Media.
From the campus of the University of the District of Columbia, this is State of Play.
Welcome to State of Play. I'm Sharon Pratt, and joining me are our co-anchors, Karen Tramontano and the Reverend Mark Thompson. So on State of Play, we like to drill down on touchstone issues of the day, those issues that are really impacting our society. And certainly nothing has impacted us more than COVID-19, but not just in terms of how it's impacted our health, how it's impacted our economy. And when things get tight in the economy, things get tough for state and local governments. Now, the last administration didn't always appreciate that, but with the change in the presidency and a new Senate, now there's understanding of it. So what we want to do is talk with our mayors. They're the ones who have to deal with where the rubber hits the road. And we have the perfect mayor to deal with that today. And that is the mayor from Flint, Michigan. And welcome today, Mr. Mayor Sheldon Neeley. We're so honored to have you with us. So can you share with us what is happening there on the ground in Flint, Michigan?
Well, thank you for having me. And I always like to, say that it's always a blessed moment where I can share some time and opportunity with like thinkers about these very serious issues that we face here. We talk about the tragedy that is going on across our country. We know that, usually when other communities get a cold, we get pneumonia in our Black and brown communities. And we've seen that and we witnessed that through this pandemic. And it really showed a level of the disparities in healthcare and these other things that made us more than other communities. And so we saw these things and we took fast action here in the city of Flint, but resources to bear is being brought to bear. It's one of the challenges. And so now with the high-minded legislative approval with the new administration, we expect some very, very good outcomes as it relates to resources being delivered for us to help champion our way through this very, very serious health crisis that our nation now faces.
Mayor, thank you for being here. Are there any lingering effects from the Flint water crisis that are impacting the COVID crisis, either in public attitude or lessons learned?
All the above. Attitudes and concerns. We definitely have a crisis in confidence here in this area as it relates to governmental relationships with the public at large because of the failures of the past. Health-wise, we do not know the long-term effects or the by-effects of poor water quality in our community, and other communities throughout our nation with older infrastructure I will see the same type of results because they're going to have to replace infrastructure all throughout our country. It's just that unfortunately here in the city of Flint, it was impacted by the failures of government. But yes, to answer your question, Reverend, all the above has been impacted and have been affected. But now we're just finding ourselves working through a triage of trying to make sure that we don't have a failure of life-supporting activities in our community at this point as it relates to this pandemic.
Mayor, as you've said, Flint has been through so much and such a failure of government. How do you rebuild that trust, especially in the middle of a pandemic?
Well, I like to refer to it as an intersection of crisis or a perfect storm. We have civil unrest, we have ongoing water crisis, and now we have this pandemic. And then we still have the dominant tendencies of American society that always have not embraced Black and brown communities. And so we have our challenges, but if we can come together as a group, and what we have done as a group is try to build a network of communication activities through our education community, through our faith-based community, our medical community, and also our government community, and just common everyday citizens. And with that network that we're building with the 3-point plan that I put together, which I call prayer, planning, and partnership, we've been able to establish a level of trust to be able to for us to all push an agenda that will improve the quality of life for families here and also save lives.
At one time, you would have had the automobile industry, I assume, as a partner. I'm not saying they aren't still a partner, but it was a robust presence in Flint. And I think you were the home of the United Auto Workers, or at least one of the chief architects of it. But now that that's so diminished, who are your partners? I see you have the University of Michigan, Michigan State, Davenport University. Are they now your partners to help you deal with this crisis?
Absolutely. We have to rebuild a level of partnership. At one time, as you stated, we had $1 billion corporation in our midst. We are the home of General Motors. At one time, we were the richest county in America in our heyday. And now, through the diversification of our economy base, we've lost some there. But we have rebuilt through our academic components and our partners. Michigan State, University of Michigan, a community college, and also a top 10 engineering college, which is Kettering University. We've been able to replace some of the things in our intellectual capital that we lost in other places. But definitely, as we go through a transition, it's a very tough time, but we have to switch to the next gear. And that's why I said prayer is very important, planning is very important, and partnership is very important in this 3-point contingent plan that I have put forth as a local leader in this community, but partnership is definitely the way out and through.
How are vaccinations going in the African American community?
Well, vaccinations, they have been elusive, to say at the least. Throughout our country, it has not been enough vaccinations provided to many communities. It goes through the state, then to the county, and then down to the municipality. So we're vaccinating very, very quickly. Through that networking system, which I talked about, my local church this past week, where it was able to deliver 800 vaccinations to people. But then the mistrust factor comes in, right? People of color here around this community talked about the dialogue about whether this vaccination was going to be good for us. As we've been not led into a direction of saying that we can trust these type of activities.
This has been very enlightening, very helpful, and we're going to continue this conversation in terms of how COVID is impacting communities across our country and how our cities particularly are dealing with it. So don't go away. Stay with State of Play.
Closed captioning brought to you in partnership with the Institute of Politics, Policy, and History. Visit IPPH.org for more information.
Welcome to Mayor Lumumba. You have really been going through it with the storm to add to your problems. It's a delight to have you, but how are things going now?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me on. And we're building steam and we're doing better. The challenges still remain. More residents have water today than the days prior, and the pressure is building up in the system. But as you can imagine, when people don't have water, they are concerned not only about hygienic issues, but they're also concerned about health issues. And so we're doing all that we can to meet the needs of our residents.
Well, to have to deal with something like this and in the middle of a pandemic would have to really be disturbing. And I imagine that your economy, just like the economies in Washington and other places, has been adversely impacted. For example, the casinos, the hotels, and the like. What has been hit the hardest?
Well, we have businesses that are shut down. As you can imagine, it's the small business owners that typically bear the greatest weight of the burden because they rarely have the capital on hand to make complete adjustments in their distribution chain and how they accommodate the needs of their businesses. But it is our residents who are trying to care for the elderly, trying to care for their loved ones that are in a really difficult position. As you can imagine, we know that we're telling people to wash their hands frequently in the pandemic. And I think that over the course of not only this emergency, but over the course of the last 12 months or so, we've really witnessed the fragility of our communities, the fragility of the infrastructure in terms of the services and the things that we provide to people. And so we have to do a better job locally and nationally in how we cover those concerns.
And with this stimulus bill, what I found encouraging about it as a former mayor myself is that I gather what they're proposing is that it will allow you to use some of that money from lost revenues, because when the businesses aren't working, you don't get sales tax. So that's impacts the ability of a city to function. And as I understand it, with the CARES Act, you couldn't do that. So did the CARES Act help, and will this help more?
Well, we were grateful to receive money from the CARES Act. As you can imagine, the needs are more expansive than what we received. I'm encouraging that as we look at the next rendition or version of support, that goes directly to cities where the rubber meets the road. Here in Jackson, based on the stipulations that was placed on the first CARES Act plan, Jackson did not qualify as a city with sufficient size to get the money directly, and so it passed through the state. And when you have a middleman in that regard, often that leads to adjustments in the allotment that you receive.
Now, once you get the money, assuming that the Congress, enacts the stimulus package, that money then goes to the state of Mississippi. I think Mississippi got $1.2 billion with CARES. I don't know what it's projected with this stimulus package. How do you get it after it gets to the state?
Well, it passed in the last version of the package that it passed through MEMA, the Mississippi Emergency Management Authority Association, and so that is who we normally get it through. We receive somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million, but as I shared with you, the threat, the interruption in our city, in our organizations and institutions that we depend on, was far more expansive than $4 million worth of loss. And so we'd like to see that allocation go directly to cities where the rubber meets the road. This is where we see the true efficacy of the policy that is implemented in Washington and whether it is truly helping people where they are.
No, I mean, I don't know how people can ignore the fact that the cities are where the rubber meets the road, and you really need this money. What do you see going forward? I mean, is there more this government can do, this administration, the Biden administration can do to help mayors such as yourself?
Well, first and foremost, we're grateful that we have an administration which is at least attentive to the issue. But I think that we have a responsibility to hold their feet to the fire like anyone else. Make sure that they understand, that they have a clear vision of how they respond best to people's needs and concerns. And I think that that's our responsibility. We have to realize that elections don't stop, or at least our responsibility doesn't stop on election day, that it stretches far beyond that. And so we have to make certain that we push our agenda and that the leadership, their decisions, their policies reflect the values that we espouse.
Well, that's very encouraging. We will commend you on what you're doing. We look forward to when there are better days. We can get back to Jackson and enjoy, heaven knows, the best catfish in the world. So thank you for being here, Mayor Lumumba. I tell you, you're terrific.
Thank you very much for having me, Mayor.
Welcome back to State of Play. We have with us the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, one of the youngest, most progressive mayors in our country, Mayor Lumumba. So Karen and Mark have some questions for you, Mayor.
Mayor, you referenced infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about why southern cities like your own city are getting hit so hard?
Well, I think that it is a multifaceted concern and issue. Some of the infrastructure challenges that we are seeing are based on the more severe weather that we're experiencing, years of neglect and a failure to resource our communities. I think that there is some level of contribution to the fact that we are a blue dot in a red sea, and so often the political construct of the city of Jackson doesn't make it conducive to receive the support that we need. But at the same time, what we recognize is a failure to support Jackson has led to a failure to support the state as a whole. The state of Mississippi is surrounded by southern states that have increased in population in recent years. Yet our numbers are dwindling because we are failing to recognize that people enjoy urban environments. In fact, we've created a Mayor and the Millennials Roundtable discussion to identify those things. And so, the effort to choke out Jackson, in a sense, leads into the state of Mississippi drowning in and of itself.
Mayor, do the pandemic itself and the pandemic economy set back the mobilization timetable to turn Mississippi purplish blue like Georgia, or are these crises helpful in the mobilization themselves?
Well, I think that it's a matter of how we concretize the moment. Whether or not we're able to see the opportunity for organizing. When we look at the history of Mississippi, when we look at the history of the South, where some of the most horrible suffering has gone on historically, that necessity and that need has birthed some of the greatest leaders and organizers we know, from King to various different sects of people who have taken it upon themselves to work towards the issues of responding to people's needs, SNCC. And so how do we concretize this moment? When we look at those great organizers, I'm of the opinion that the greatest organizer of all time can be oppression. And when people are dealing with these conditions, when we identify the fragility of our communities and the fact that people are living in cycles of humiliation, if we can concretize this moment, take it from a mystical, mysterious place where we see young people taking to the streets and protesting conditions and protesting issues of racial discrimination and inequity, then it can be an opportunity where we can truly pressure to see the response that we need in Mississippi, to see the response that we need that really gets to the heart of what people need most.
Well, that's been terrific. I mean, just Mayor Lumumba, you really are a progressive thinker. And I certainly understand how you are possibly going to move this very southern city to being the most radical in the country. So thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for staying with us here on State of Play. And it was really terrific to get the insights of those who really have to deal with it up close and personal. Mayors Neeley and Flint, Mayors Lumumba and Jackson. And maybe I have the bias and prejudice of someone who was a mayor. I don't get how the government, the federal government, doesn't understand that you've got to get money to these state and local governments. Otherwise, that average person is going to really suffer. I mean, that's how I see it.
Certainly the last 4 years that didn't happen. But hopefully with the new administration, their Office of Intergovernmental is going to be, running the show. And it's these testimonies from mayors that are so important and that really need to be heard in Washington. Otherwise, Washington, they have no idea what real people are going through.
I think Karen's right. We also know the dichotomy that exists a lot of times when it comes to the city. She's right. The last administration had disdain for cities. And so if this is where people are and this is where people need help, they should be heard first and foremost. That's where a lot of the economic engines are, especially in some of these states that have large rural areas. And if we address the concerns of those in the cities, then that ultimately addresses the concerns, micro, of the individuals most disproportionately affected by this COVID economy.
Yeah, because when, for example, restaurant workers, I know in many cities, 50 to 60% of those restaurants will never come back. Hotels, there's some of these hotels will never come back. So the individuals or the entities that have to bridge that are more likely to be your state governments or your city governments or your county governments trying to get needed resources to those folks. And why that is not understood, I'll never know.
Well, and you couple that, Mayor, with some of the infrastructure issues that both mayors have had to confront and we're discussing. You know, you can't have a restaurant if you don't have water, right? You can't run a hotel if nobody wants to come to the city because the bridges are broken or it's flooding. So the importance of infrastructure and you know, that'll be another topic that I'm sure that we'll be talking about, you know, really can't be understated.
I've been saying, Mayor, in this Black Lives Matter moment, police are governed locally. You have to deal with them at the local level. There's no national oversight of that. Well, people are helped locally. And so if we're going to survive COVID, survive this pandemic economy, it's got to start right where the people are and what form of government, what branch of government is closer to the people and the crises they're facing than our cities.
Absolutely. So we're going to continue, and I'm glad we're going to continue to drill down on it, where we talk to folks who deal with those folks who've been impacted by the loss of jobs, as well as those who talk about the big picture. How do you correct it for the economy? So don't go away. Stay with us here on State of Play. Welcome back to State of Play. We're drilling down on the issue of COVID, not just how it impacts our health, but how it's impacting our economy. And we have with us now somebody who really can talk about how it's impacting jobs in the very most personal way, President Ada Briceño. And she is with Local 11, and which represents, I think, several of hospitality workers in Arizona, LA, Orange County. Wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Mayor Pratt.
And before we really get into the heart of it with Karen Tramontano, who herself was with SEIU for many years, as well as the Reverend Mark Thompson, we do want to ask you, I know your son had a battle with COVID, and can you tell us how is he doing now?
He's doing well. We are very fortunate to say that he's doing well. It was a nightmare, not only for him for close to a week and a half, but also, you know, also the household. But we're very fortunate. We're very thankful that he's, you know, doing great. He's working hard to make sure that we all get through this pandemic.
Well, I know Karen worked with SEIU for a while, worked with John Sweeney. I know she has questions.
Thank you very much for all of your work. How does this federal economic relief, is it best shaped to help your workers? Is it with the unemployment boost on the insurance numbers? Is it with direct payments? What package makes the most sense for your members?
Well, I think the economic, the stimulus, getting a check to our workers is crucial. It's start in the correct direction, but we need to see that increase. We think it's crucial in order for our members who are hit. 90% of them are not employed. It is a drastic, very, very difficult situation. But also we need regulations to the PPP program. We have seen that so many employers, large employers, multi-million-dollar corporations have taken advantage of this. Hotels have taken advantage of this program without putting the workers back to work. We need to make sure that we get some security that this money is going to be used to put workers back. And we did an analysis of our hotel workers in Los Angeles and Orange County, and also Phoenix, Arizona, from May to October, that revealed that the PPP failed in its primary goal. of returning our workers. And instead, as you heard, all this money went to corporations like Columbia Sussex, who received $50 million through 20 separate entities, and did not face this scrutiny. And, we need that to change. We need some regulation to make sure that people are able to get back to the industry. So I hope that's being worked on, but that's something that we need. We need them to be fully audited to make sure that we can move forward, and that this economic package gets to everyone, trickles down to every single person.
President Briceño, congratulations on unionizing Disneyland. I know they want to reopen, but what are the prerequisites for reopening for your workers in regards to safety, rehiring laid off workers, and any other prerequisites that you all would want to see happen?
Look, we were in a long negotiations to ensure that workers were protected once they returned to work. So we have concluded negotiations with Disney. We believe that it's crucial for people to be vaccinated before they return to work. It is a very difficult situation to be in this crisis without having the vaccination. So vaccination for us is important, but we believe that we reached a good agreement that once it opens, Disney will move with the safety protocols that we all agreed to during our negotiations. And I just have to say that it is really impressive the way Disney has moved the healthcare for our workers, even if they're not working. Healthcare is everything to our members, especially right now. And it's been a very difficult struggle. We've done car caravans throughout our three, Southern California and Arizona, so we can keep healthcare. We have been successful in making sure that 20,000 of our members and their families continue their healthcare despite the fact that they're not working. And employers have paid over $40 million into our trust fund to keep them covered. So that has been through negotiations, through pushing the employer to keep those healthcare benefits moving forward. And we're going to continue to press the employers through the pandemic to keep this going.
And what of the state legislation to rehire workers that were laid off, to bring them back?
Yes, that is AB 1074 by Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher. We actually had passed it through the Assembly and the Senate, and unfortunately, it didn't get a signature from the governor. But we feel very secure that this time around we will get a signature, and we will pass recall to make sure that workers across California are able to return back to work when the industry reopens, not before. We're not asking them to be put back to work if there's no work. We're asking once it happens that they need to return them. We have people who have given their lives to that industry, to build them, decades working there. And the fairest thing to do is to bring them back. I was in our industry already after 9/11 happened. I saw how the industry did not return people to work after 9/11. Everything shut down. Once they recovered, and they recovered nicely, they didn't bring people back. People were laid off and never put back to work. And then I also saw it again after 2008, after the recession. People again were not put back. And so when you and I go back to our semi-normal after the pandemic, we've got to make sure that room attendants, cooks, and dishwashers are able to do the same, that they're able to go back to a place where they've given their heart and soul to.
And we hope with President Biden, I wish we could really drill down on that with you as well, but hopefully his team will help what you're trying to do to make certain that workers are respected and brought back to work in the way they should. So thank you so much for being on State of Play.
Closed captioning brought to you in partnership with the Institute of Politics, Policy, and History. Visit IPPH.org for more information.
So welcome back to State of Play. We're talking about how the federal government can help re-energize our economy and help people who are really struggling. And to give us the big picture, we have Dr. Jason Furman. He played a major role with the Obama administration, and he continues to provide counsel from his position at the Harvard Kennedy School. Wonderful to have you with us, Dr. Furman.
Great to be with you.
So do you think that the federal government needs to continue to be aggressive about providing support to businesses, to individuals, to even state and local government?
Absolutely. We are still in a deep hole economically. Too many people are suffering too much, lacking jobs, and a big response is needed. What we've done so far has actually worked. It's not been perfect. It hasn't solved all the problems, but it's prevented what could have been another Great Depression and instead made it merely a bad recession. To get ourselves out of the merely bad recession, we're going to need to both control the virus, but also make sure people have enough money to spend once they can go out and enjoy their lives fully again.
Now, there's always sort of ideological tension, so it seems, around the issue of whether one should deploy monies to state and local government. It's always agreed that if you deploy it to individuals and if you deploy it to businesses, but given the fact that state and local governments have to deal with so much, and that's a part of the sector of our economy, what is the reason for the pushback around that?
Yeah, so state and local governments have faced a double whammy. They both are losing tax revenue at exactly the same time when they have many, many greater costs to respond to the emergency. Absolutely, they should get assistance. They should continue to get assistance. In the wake of the financial crisis, one of the mistakes Congress made was they didn't give enough money to states and localities. They ended up cutting a lot of jobs, and it really hurt our ability to get our economy back on track as quickly and fully as we would have liked to. I think this time around, we're not going to make that mistake because I think President Biden is proposing a very substantial amount for states and localities.
So the CARES Act provided, as you felt, a really critical bridge. And I gather with Secretary of Treasury Yellen, she really does endorse the notion of going big. So does Chairman Powell, I gather. Do you share their thinking?
Absolutely. I think it's better to err on the side of going big at a time like this. The economy is in, among the deepest holes that we've seen since the Great Depression. Controlling the virus is essential. We can't get back on our feet without that, but it's not enough to open a restaurant. You also need people to be able to afford to eat in the restaurant. And that's where support for families, support for households comes in to all of this. And, continuing to do that and expanding it is very important.
But you have also advanced the notion of triggers. So in other words, go big. And if it appears that you need to continue to go big, it keeps going. But if you discover that things are getting better, then you can put a brake on it. Is that your thinking?
Yeah, I think there's an unusual amount of uncertainty right now. We might be about to have among the most spectacular years in the U.S. economy and be fully back to normal by the end of this year. Or we could have worse variants of the virus. It could take longer to put everything back together again. We just don't know. And so building in something that says if the unemployment rate is high at the end of the year, we're going to continue to assist families. The unemployment rate comes down a lot, then you can rely more on your job and less on the government. I think that would be a wise thing to do. It wasn't included in the package that's currently being debated, but hopefully something like it will be included in the next package called Build Back Better.
This pandemic has sort of pulled the covers off of so many things. I mean, we've seen it with tensions around racial strife and the like, but it's also pulled the covers off of what were trends already taking place with our economy as we move towards an economy based on artificial intelligence. And it seemingly has accelerated some of that shift. If I were a commercial office builder, I'd be a little nervous right now. What do we do about that?
Yeah, we've had decades of increasing inequality. And now we have a pandemic. If you're like me and your job takes place entirely over Zoom, you're mostly unaffected. If your job takes place face to face, you face this choice. Are you going to do it in a much more risky and dangerous way, or are you not going to do your job, or maybe your job ceases to exist? So the pandemic has posed some terrible choices and trade-offs in the economy. And that's why President Biden's Build Back Better is going to be so important. It's not just recovering this year, it's making longer-term investments in supporting jobs, in creating jobs, addressing caregiving, every other aspect of our economy, so that we can have less inequality and more opportunity coming out of this.
Well, that's a big ticket topic, and one that deserves a show devoted just to that topic. We really appreciate your guidance here, so don't go away. Stay here with State of Play. We've got more questions for Dr. Furman. Welcome back to State of Play. We're very lucky indeed, as you know, to have Dr. Jason Furman with us. And I know Reverend Mark Thompson and Karen Tramontano have questions for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Furman, repairing the economy really means making immigrants whole, doesn't it? Especially those who are essential workers in the pandemic. Isn't that true?
Absolutely, Reverend. Immigrants, I think, are really the heart and soul of America as a country. They're absolutely critical to us economically as well. We cannot have a successful economy without successful immigrants. They bore a lot of the brunt of the pandemic, both losing jobs. In many cases, were denied assistance by Congress last year that others in the country got, that immigrants didn't. And so making sure that they're getting assistance this time around is really important, making sure they're getting back into jobs and ultimately a path to citizenship are all critical steps to recover now and to build back better.
So, Dr. Furman, I have two questions related to employment. One is, how do we avoid a jobless recovery? And the other is, as it relates to triggers, unemployment triggers in particular, with Black and brown communities having higher unemployment rates, how do we factor that in?
Yeah, those are great questions, Karen. I'm worried about a jobless recovery. I think it's going to be easier to get our GDP growth back than our jobs back. But what matters to people is their jobs. That says we're going to need to push further, farther, faster, longer. With that in mind. That means more federal assistance. That means the Federal Reserve continuing to stay at it, pushing for as low an unemployment rate and hot an economy as we can have. No matter what economy we have, we're going to have, at least for the next several years, unemployment rate for Black and brown communities is going to be higher, or at least it always has been, than white communities. And we need to recognize that when we design our support and assistance. I'm in favor of triggers that are based on, if the unemployment rate is high, you get additional assistance. I would make those triggers based on states or even local areas. So if you're in an area with a high unemployment rate, you'll continue to get assistance. And I would pick the number for the trigger in part knowing that whatever number you pick, it's probably going to be higher for the Black and brown community. And you want to take that into account in the way you set the whole program up to start with.
Well, I know President Biden has spoken of Build Back Better. Do you think that should be a centerpiece of Build Back Better? I mean, helping people to segue to what are the jobs of the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, the problem is a business is closed. You need to reopen the business. That's the immediate thing. But over time, you need people to have better skills in order to get better jobs and be paid more. And you need businesses creating more jobs. And there's no one simple magic switch you can pull to make that happen. You need to do everything, whether it's education, infrastructure, improving the health system, reforming immigration. And, it's a long list, but we have a daunting set of challenges. And so I think it's important to follow through on all of it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Furman. You've helped us understand it so much better. So thank you for being with us here on State of Play. Welcome back to State of Play. We've had some terrific guests. They've certainly given us a better sense of where people are economically and why people needed additional money. Our mayors, Neeley and Lumumba, let us know that they already had problems, infrastructure problems, climate change problems. So they desperately needed this money to help with emergency medical workers and school system workers and police and the like. Then we heard from Briceño, who told us about the hospitality industry really impacted in major cities, loss of jobs in restaurants and even hotels. And then we had the big picture from Jason Furman, who said Secretary Yellen was correct, Biden, Harris were correct. You needed to go big if you're really going to have an impact. The extraordinary thing, at least to me, is how so many Americans can benefit from the $1,400 check. So many Americans can benefit in terms of the monies to help with children and eliminate to some extent poverty for children. How so many Americans can support it, but not one Republican vote. I just don't get it. Do you get it, Mark?
Well, yes and no. It's not surprising. They're consistent in their interposition and nullification. But it only hurts even some of their followers. And as Lyndon Johnson and Dr. King said, you can pick a man's pocket, or in this case, pick a person's pocket, even while you're convincing them of something that's in a culture war that really isn't even a culture war. But I think you're right. What we heard today at the local level was very important. Those are the people that can make a difference. And in spite of the Republican Party, I hope even those who need some of that help most, who still follow the Republican line of thinking, will also get that help themselves.
But there's always got to be a political strategy. And for every single Republican to back off of supporting it. Karen, you've been involved with national campaigns. Do you get the strategy that they're crafting here?
Well, I think what they're doing is looking back. And Mayor, if you remember in 2008 and 2009, the Republicans sort of starved that recovery. So it was really slow. It was jobless for years. And, people were in pain. And as a result, the Obama-Biden administration didn't do very well in the midterms. And I think that's what the Republicans are trying to do this time. They think it works for them for people to not feel economic relief from the party in power. They think that's going to inure to their benefit. Now, unfortunately, what that also means is that people, as we've heard from the mayors, people are hurting. And then as we heard from Jason, what is needed is a really, really robust package to enhance this recovery and get us all back to where we were before COVID hit.
Well, as god-awful as that recession was, the Great Recession, and some people still haven't recovered from it, this is a health crisis combined with now an economic crisis. So people feel it in a very immediate way. Not everybody was at home, stopped in their tracks in the 2008-09 dynamic in the way that they are now. So again, I don't get it. Maybe they have a strategy that will come to pass. But at any rate, now those who follow State of Play, thanks to our great guests, have a better grasp of it. So thanks for being here at State of Play.